Hey guys! So today we are going to talk about programming language strength, and probably, in my opinion, the least appreciated strength a programming language can have. So let's get into it. You see, the other day I was talking to one of my managers, and we were having this great discussion because he started this really interesting initiative basically at our office. And this is the sort of thing I really enjoy this, because this person who has a background in games development and system levels programming took it upon himself to say, hey, you know what, we have all these web developers here, let's drop things down a little bit, let's go a little bit lower and have a weekly thing where we sit together and hack together well, in this case it's going to be a NES simulator, and we might make an operating system at some point, I suppose, but let's go a little bit lower and go outside of our comfort zone and let's start hacking away at some stuff. Now, most of us was, pretty much everybody was very excited about that. And, the people in support kind of looked at us, okay, so you sit all day, you write code, and you get really tired, and then you just want to go home. And then somebody comes along and says, hey, let's write some other code. And everybody goes, oh, yeah, let's do that. And then you sit even longer and work. Yeah, they won't get it. It's okay. It's okay. Anywho, we get to talking, because what's interesting about this is that he basically states that, well, for him, who has done this a few times, it's going to be, fairly straightforward because he's doing the exercises with us, so we can have example code if somebody gets stuck and all that good stuff. And then I tell him that this is the best part about having somebody around who you can follow along with. You see, the biggest problem, at least I've found myself when I've been trying to get further into system levels programming, is that there are simply too few tutors and there are too few resources, or very straight, like well-written resources with learning in mind, if you will. There's a lot of academics around it. There's tons of books and so forth about the academics of everything, but not so much when it comes to this sort of thing. And that's the difference between, in my world, why something gets fairly easily adopted versus something that only a handful of people actually use. Now, just hear me out now, because the argument that I'm making to you is that the biggest assets, and I think that this is why JavaScript is where it is, well, not necessarily only, but I think this is why it's one of the biggest strengths, and that is the amount of community that is revolving around a certain language. The adoption is very tied into how many people are actually producing content. And he goes, yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it, because the thing is, what's so beautiful about people producing content is that it does, for us, as an example, there are hundreds of, if not thousands of people who have built a NES simulator, but it doesn't matter, because we're doing it for the first time. And unless you have people who have done it or have experience, like tutors who produce content or learning materials on different ways to do it consistently, not just once, but consistently, keeps the community alive, if you will, and make sure that people who are interested in the beginning of their career get something that they can just kind of follow along with, because when you're starting, you have no idea. And I told them that it's one of the most frustrating things when it comes to learning system levels programming or working with assembly and all these really low level details, is that it's very tricky for you to find good learning materials. So having someone who has, 15-20 years of experience, been doing this for years and years and years, to just kind of offer and say, hey, you know what, let's have this thing together, I'll show you how to do it, and in return, because for him, he's new to Scala, so he's going to do it in Scala. Like, everybody can do it in their own programming language. You can probably guess which one I picked for a system levels project. I'm not going to say the name, but I suppose you can guess. Anywho, that's a real benefit. It's an immense benefit, because now all the people there who have been interested in this sort of programming have someone who can show them the ropes. And this is the thing that I argue when it comes to people asking me about, you know, being self-taught versus having a tutor. It's a lot easier if you have somebody who can kind of guide you, and considering that this person, he's basically gone through all the hassle of looking through all the resources for how different people basically build these emulators, he's diluted it all down to one simple guide for us to follow along, and he touches on all the right concepts at the right time. It becomes very streamlined, and it feels a lot more approachable than it did when I tried to do, you know, when you try to do it yourself. So that's the thing that I think is sometimes forgotten when we talk about programming languages and so forth. And this is like, I know people like to hate on JavaScript and say PHP and so forth, but the one thing that you can't take away from them is how big the repository of information and guides and tutorials and relevant learning materials, like these languages have that in droves. That's not something that the more, I don't know what to call them, the more high profile, the more sophisticated, the more prestigious languages have. Not that much. And honestly, it's one of the things I was asked a little while ago by one of my coworkers, when, you know, to share my perspective on, you know, the move that Oracle is making with Java 9 and like how they're trying to kind of blow new life into that platform. And I said, I honestly think that it's a mistake to try to make this language into an innovative thing, because the thing is, Java is not picked because it is an innovative language. It is picked because it's simple, it's stable, and a lot of people know it. Now, what's lacking, in my opinion, is the same sort of massive repository of learning materials, relevant learning materials, things that make the language feel easy to adopt. Tutorials, videos, bloggers, people just making content. Like, there are people who are doing it, but most of it is unrelevant or like a little bit outdated, and it doesn't have the same level of quality as you see for tutorials that come from JavaScript land, for example. And that's something I think that we should remember, because if a language is easy to adopt and it has a lot of people pushing it and talking about it, and, you know, people are excited about it, that's actually almost more powerful than how fast the language is. I look at Ruby, for example, and I think that that's something we underestimate quite often. We get, especially when, you know, it's engineers talking to each other, we like to focus on the syntax, we like to focus on, you know, what can the language do, we like to focus on how fast the language is. And these things are absolutely important, but none of it matters if nobody's using the language. And when that journey starts by having a really big active community, and that's the thing that you want. You want people who are invested in the platform to the point where they will onboard and help new people get on track with the language that they are using. And that's why I feel so, well, I'm very fortunate that I have a manager who actually takes the time to do this. And in turn, I'm trying to do the same thing for you. Have a great day.